My father died last year. A semi-truck ran a red light outside of Galloway, and that was it. He was gone. The funeral was quiet, small. He would have hated anything dramatic. I gave the eulogy, shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. We buried him on a warm October afternoon. I remember because the leaves were gold, and he always said that was his favorite time of year. He was my best friend. I still talk about him like he's alive sometimes, in my head. Sometimes out loud when I'm driving. Just little things. Dad, you'd hate this traffic, or you'd love this song. That kind of thing. It's how I've managed the grief. Kept it distant enough to function. I even saved his number in my phone. Stupid, I know. I couldn't delete it. Yesterday, I was reorganizing my bookshelves, trying to stop thinking for a while. I knocked over a framed photo of us at the lake cabin. I picked it up and smiled because he looked so young in that picture. Happier back before Mom got sick. That's when my phone rang. At first, I didn't even look at it. I was in the middle of untangling a stack of receipts that fell behind the shelf. But then, I saw the screen light up. Dad. My whole body went still. I stared at it like it was a joke, like maybe my phone glitched or synced with something by accident. But then the phone kept ringing. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared. Then, without thinking, I answered. I didn't say hello. I didn't say anything. There was a hiss of static, like old radio static, like something crawling through a signal that didn't want to come through. Then the voice came. Not just a voice. His voice. Rayla, it said, you need to dig under the old oak tree. Then the line went dead. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even drop the phone. I just stood there frozen, hearing those words replay again and again in my head. You need to dig under the old oak tree. It didn't make sense. I'd heard prank calls before. AI-generated voices. I've seen what tech can do. But this wasn't artificial. It wasn't synthetic. It was my dad's voice. And not just the sound, the rhythm, the tone, the way he said my name. No algorithm could have known how he used to say it when I was scared or sad or stubborn. I sat down on the floor and replayed it in my mind. I knew that tree. We all did. The oak behind his cabin, the one he told us never to go near. When I was a kid, I once tried to build a rope swing on it and he lost his mind. I thought he was just being overprotective, maybe a little superstitious. He always said that tree was off limits, dangerous, but he never said why. After the call, I checked the number. It was his, but it was marked disconnected when I tried to dial back. I checked the logs. No caller ID spoofing, no signs of rerouting. The call came from his phone, his actual number. I didn't know what to think. Was someone messing with me? Was this some sick joke? Was I finally losing it after holding it together too long? Or was he trying to tell me something? The next thing I knew, I was digging through my junk drawer for the keys to the cabin. I hadn't been there since we cleared it out after the funeral. I told myself I'd go back someday, maybe bring someone with me. But not like this. Not with my fingers trembling around a rusted key ring. Not with a voice still echoing in my ears. You need to dig under the old oak tree. That's why I'm telling this story now. Because if what I found under that tree means what I think it does, then my father didn't just leave behind memories. He left a message, a secret, something he never told anyone, maybe not even my mother. And part of me still hopes there's a logical explanation for it all. But a bigger part of me knows. That call wasn't just a glitch or grief playing tricks on me. That call was a beginning, and I wish I hadn't picked up. I didn't drive to the cabin right away. After the call, I sat on my kitchen floor for almost 2 hours just holding the phone in my lap. It was still warm. I kept checking it, like maybe the call would come again. It never did. My apartment was completely silent. The kind of silence you can hear. My cat, Jasper, was asleep on the windowsill, the late afternoon sun warming his fur. There were dishes in the sink. My classroom lesson plan for Monday was still open on my laptop. Life was just continuing, but I wasn't. My name is Rayla Hart. I'm 32. I teach visual arts at a public high school near Asheville. My life is quiet, mostly. I'm not married. I don't have kids. My students are my favorite people in the world, and I mean that. They're honest, weird, messy little masterpieces, and I love showing them how to make sense of chaos through color. That's something my dad taught me. He wasn't an artist in the way I am. He built things, furniture mostly, chairs, benches, cribs, shelves, always working with his hands. But he used to say, "There's beauty in function, Ray. If something holds your weight, it deserves respect." I think he meant more than just furniture. After my mom passed when I was 21, he didn't talk about her much. Her name was Celine. She was French-American, quiet, soft-spoken, incredibly smart. She taught literature at a private college nearby. When she got sick, everything in our house changed. My dad became more private, less talkative. He would stay up late working in the shed or driving out to the cabin for long weekends alone. I thought he was just grieving in his own way. He built the cabin 10 years ago after Mom died. At first, I thought it was just a project to keep his hands busy. But he started going there more often, staying longer. He wouldn't let anyone else visit for the first few years. Then finally, one Christmas, he invited me up. I remember walking in and smelling cedar, fresh paint, sawdust, and something else. Something older, almost like soil or ash. The place was beautiful but cold. There were no family photos, no TV, no phone service, just stacks of firewood and a radio that only played jazz. He didn't like me asking questions about it, especially about the tree. The old oak sat behind the cabin. It was massive, gray and twisted, its roots curling into the earth like claws. The first time I saw it, I thought it looked like something out of a dark fairy tale. He caught me staring and said, "Don't go near it. That tree's not safe." I laughed, thought he was joking. But he wasn't. He got serious, almost angry. "I mean it, Rayla. You stay away from that tree." So I did. We all did. I visited the cabin maybe 5 times over the years. Each visit was brief. He never stayed overnight when I was there. He never explained why. He just kept things light, showed me new furniture he was building, made coffee on the old stove, played records. It always felt like he was keeping something just out of sight. After the funeral, I couldn't bring myself to go back. My Uncle Grant offered to help me clear it out, but I said no. I wanted to do it myself. It felt like something I owed him. But when I got there, I couldn't go inside. I sat in my car for an hour looking at the porch, the peeling paint, the closed door. I told myself I'd come back in spring. That was 11 months ago. And now, out of nowhere, my dad's number had called me. A voice that sounded like him told me to dig under the one place he never let me near. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I wanted to believe it was a prank. I wanted to believe it was nothing. But something inside me was already shifting, even before I stood up from the floor. I walked into my bedroom and pulled the old duffel bag from my closet. Inside were the cabin keys, still on the carved wooden keychain he made me when I got my first apartment. A little owl with wide eyes and a crooked beak. I ran my thumb over the grain and my chest tightened. I packed a flashlight, gloves, a jacket, a charger, and one of his old flannels. Then I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. My eyes looked different, like I'd already started losing something I didn't yet understand. I left Jasper with a neighbor and got in my Jeep. The sun had just begun to set. The air felt colder than usual for early March, like the weather knew I was driving into something I wasn't ready to face. As I turned onto the road that led into the mountains, I felt the weight of every mile between me and the truth. The closer I got, the more it felt like I was heading somewhere I'd already been. Only this time, I was going alone. The drive up to the cabin took just over 2 hours, but it felt longer. The road was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. I kept the radio off. I couldn't bear to fill the silence. I needed to think, but nothing in my head felt steady. I kept hearing the voice, over and over, like it was stitched into the air around me. "You need to dig under the old oak tree." The first time I'd ever heard my dad truly raise his voice was about that tree. I was 11, barefoot, chasing Jasper, our old dog, not the cat, when I ran past the fence behind the cabin. I didn't even touch the tree, but when he saw me near it, he dropped a mug of coffee right out of his hand and sprinted across the yard. He didn't yell often, but that day he shouted my name with a fear I'd never seen on his face, not even when Mom was in the hospital. That memory kept pressing against my ribs as I drove deeper into the mountains. By the time I reached the gravel turnoff, the sun had disappeared behind a wall of gray clouds. The forest felt dense, pressing against the windshield. When I pulled up in front of the cabin, my headlights cut through the fog like 2 pale arms reaching into the unknown. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the sky, or the way the trees leaned a little too close, like they had moved while no one was watching. I got out slowly, gripping my keys tighter than I needed to. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, even though there hadn't been a fire here in months. My boots crunched against the gravel. Everything felt wrong and familiar at the same time. The front steps creaked as I climbed them. I unlocked the door and pushed it open, half expecting something to be waiting inside. But it was just as we left it. A layer of dust coated the shelves. A half-finished wooden chair sat near the fireplace, the tools still neatly arranged around it. His thermos was still on the mantel. My breath caught a little at that. I didn't stay long. I didn't want to look too closely. I dropped my bag by the couch and grabbed the flashlight. Then I walked to the back door and stepped outside. There it was, the tree. The old oak loomed at the edge of the property line. Its branches stretched wide and low, some dragging against the ground like they were trying to reach something just out of sight. The bark was warped and dark, almost black in places, and its roots had twisted out of the earth like veins breaking through skin. Even now, as an adult, I didn't want to go near it. I stood there for a minute, breathing shallowly, trying to work up the nerve. My dad was a rational man. He didn't believe in ghosts or omens, but that tree scared him. I never understood why. I walked back to the shed and grabbed a shovel. It was heavy and rusted, but still usable. I carried it across the yard, gripping it like a lifeline. My feet slowed as I crossed the invisible line he had always warned me not to cross. It felt like stepping into a place where I wasn't supposed to be, where the air had a different weight. I picked a spot at the base of the trunk, near a wide root that curled like a fist. Then I dug. The ground was hard, packed tight from seasons of weather. My hands were already sore by the second hole. I kept digging. Each time the shovel hit something solid, my heart jumped, but it was always another root or rock. My breath came faster. My legs ached. The cold crept up through my jeans, but I didn't stop. I don't know how long I was out there. At some point, the clouds opened and a slow, cold rain began to fall. I wiped the mud from my face with my sleeve and kept going. My heart was pounding, not from the digging, but from the not knowing. Then the shovel hit something flat, not a root, not a stone, metal. I dropped to my knees and used my hands to clear the rest of the dirt. My fingers scraped over a rectangular surface. I could feel the corners. I pushed away more mud until I saw it clearly. A box, heavy, rusted, and locked. It didn't look like it belonged to the earth. It looked placed, hidden. I stared at it for a long time, letting the rain soak through my jacket. My hands shook as I tried to lift it. It was wedged deep, but it moved. I pulled it free and fell backward onto the wet ground, panting. I sat there, holding it on my lap, too afraid to open it. My fingers hovered over the latch. The lock had long since rusted through. All I had to do was pull, but I didn't. Not yet. Because right then, sitting in the dirt with the rain falling around me, I realized something I hadn't let myself think until that moment. Whoever or whatever made that call knew this was here, and my father had buried it for a reason. I held the box in my lap for a long time before I opened it. My legs were numb, soaked from the cold rain and muddy ground. My breath fogged in the air, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. The weight of the box pressed into my thighs like it was part of me now, like it had been waiting for me. The lock had rusted through, but it still resisted when I tried to force it open. I pulled harder. The latch snapped off with a sharp crack, and I jumped. My hands were caked with wet dirt, trembling as I slowly lifted the lid. Inside, everything looked perfectly arranged, protected, like someone had known it would sit in the ground for years. There was a small cassette tape, labeled in my father's handwriting, for Rayla. Next to it, an old photograph. I blinked hard, trying to understand what I was seeing. It was me, a baby version of me, barely a year old, held in the arms of a woman I didn't recognize. She had long black hair, soft eyes, and a cautious smile that looked nothing like the pictures I'd seen of my mother. Underneath the photo were several yellowed envelopes, letters, stacked tightly, sealed and numbered in order. I picked up the first one. The envelope was fragile, the paper dried out and brittle. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding in my chest. "My sweet girl," it began. "I hope you never have to read this, but if you're holding this letter, then the box has found you." The handwriting was shaky, not my dad's. This was written by a woman named Elena, And the more I read, the faster my heart raced. She said she was my biological mother. I read the line twice, then 3 times. My lungs felt tight, like I couldn't draw in enough air. I shook my head as if it would knock the words loose from my memory. You were born into a complicated love. Evan loved me once. I loved him. But our world didn't leave room for the kind of truth we carried. When you were born, we made a choice. A painful one. I couldn't finish the letter. My fingers gripped it so tightly I nearly tore it. I dropped it back in the box and looked down at the rest. There were 5 more, each marked with a date, each one older than the last. I grabbed the cassette next. My father's voice was burned into my memory from years of bedtime stories and morning calls. But hearing it again, knowing he had recorded it specifically for me, made my chest collapse. I didn't have a player on me. The nearest one would be inside the cabin. I pushed to my feet and carried the box with both arms, the weight of it anchoring me to the ground. My boots squelched in the mud as I trudged back to the porch. I glanced once over my shoulder at the tree, towering behind me, now a silent witness to what had been buried for decades. Inside the cabin, the power was off. It always was. My dad never bothered to hook up a generator. He liked living slow, but he kept a battery-operated cassette player under the shelf in the living room. I found it still there, tucked behind a stack of record sleeves. I inserted the tape with shaking fingers. I pressed play. His voice filled the room like it had never left. If you're hearing this, Ray, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you I did. But there are things in this world we think we can bury, only to realize they were never really gone. They breathe under the surface. They wait. He paused. I could hear his breath. I imagined him sitting in this very room, holding this same recorder, trying to say what I now held in my hands. Elena didn't die the way you were told. Celine knew about her. It wasn't betrayal. It was tragedy, and I couldn't carry it anymore. So I built this cabin. I buried the truth, and I lived with it. I shut the tape off. My fingers hovered over the stop button like it burned. I felt sick. Everything I had believed, my entire understanding of where I came from, was suddenly cracked down the middle. My father had lived with this secret. My mother had raised me knowing I wasn't hers by blood. My real mother had written letters I never read, and all of it was hidden beneath that tree. I stood up, grabbing the box, and set it on the table. I pulled out the rest of the letters and began lining them up by date. The earliest one was from 1991. That was the year I was born. The last was dated 2 weeks before my dad's death. The truth hadn't been buried once. It had been buried again and again, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to uncover the rest. I heard gravel crunch outside. I froze. Through the window, a figure was approaching. A man, familiar, broad-shouldered, gray hair. My Uncle Grant. He hadn't called me in months. I hadn't told him I was coming, and yet, there he was. I stepped back from the window, the cassette player still on the table, the letters still open, the photo still staring up at me with quiet certainty. He knocked on the door once, hard, then he opened it himself. Grant stepped inside like he had every right to. He didn't speak at first. His eyes moved from the box on the table to the cassette player to me. He looked like he had aged 10 years since the funeral. His face was pale, his coat soaked through from the rain, and his boots tracked mud across the wooden floor, but he didn't seem to notice. "You weren't supposed to come here," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I kept both hands on the edge of the table, grounding myself. My body felt like it could shatter at any second. He looked at the open letters, then at the photograph. His jaw tightened. "You found it." I took a breath. "What is this, Grant? Who is Elena?" He looked away, jaw clenching. "You weren't supposed to ever ask that." I got a phone call from Dad's number. He told me to dig under the oak. I don't know how. I don't even care how. I just want the truth. He sat down across from me. He didn't touch anything. For a long time, he just stared at his hands, covered in rainwater and dirt. "Elena was real," he said. "She was your mother. Evan loved her. They were going to get married. She was different. Kind, fierce. She never let anyone push her around. Then what happened to her?" His eyes met mine. "I happened." My chest went still. He continued. "I was drinking back then. I had a temper. Nothing criminal, just careless. I came up here one night, uninvited. Elena was here alone. Evan had gone to town. I wasn't planning anything. I just wanted to talk to her. But I was angry. Angry about their life, about everything I didn't have. He paused, shaking his head. There was an argument. She said things that cut deep. She told me to leave. I grabbed her arm. She tried to shove me off. She fell. He took a breath, his voice growing thinner. Her head hit the root. One of those giant roots by the tree. She didn't move. I thought she was faking, but she wasn't. I gripped the table harder. My mouth went dry. Dad knew, I said. He knew, and he covered for you. He nodded slowly. I called him, told him everything. He drove straight here. He was quiet, didn't yell, didn't hit me, just stared at her. Then he told me to leave, said he'd handle it. I don't know why he did it. Maybe for you. Maybe because I was all he had left after Celine died. You let me believe my mother was someone else. He looked at me, tears swelling in the corners of his eyes. You were just a baby. Celine stepped in, raised you like her own. She and Evan agreed never to tell you. They wanted to protect you from all of this, from me. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't move. I backed away from the table. My knees felt weak, like they might give out. So Dad buried her memory, her name, everything. He let me grow up thinking she never existed. Grant stood. He blamed himself every day, but he never told, not the cops, not anyone. He thought silence was the safest way forward. No, I said. Silence is what killed her twice. He didn't respond. He just stood there, water dripping from his sleeves. I walked over to the window. The tree was still there, unmoved by the storm, but it felt different now. It felt like something watching. I think he wanted me to find it, I said. That's why he left the box. That's why he recorded the tape. He knew I would come back someday. I think you're right, Grant whispered. I think he couldn't carry it anymore. I turned back to him. You're leaving, now. He nodded. Are you going to the police? I don't know yet, I said, but if you ever come near me again, I will. He didn't argue. He walked toward the door, pausing just before he opened it. Rayla, I'm sorry for everything. I'm not the one who needs your apology. He stepped out into the rain. The door clicked shut behind him. I stayed frozen for a minute, then walked over to the cassette player. I hit play again. My father's voice filled the room. If you found this, then I've failed to keep it buried. And maybe that's a good thing. You deserve the truth, even if it hurts. I listened to the whole message this time. Every word. My father's voice shaking near the end. There's a kind of forgiveness that doesn't come easy. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe you won't. But I love you, Rayla. Always. When the tape clicked to a stop, I sat back and stared at the photo of Elena, my mother. She looked strong, not fragile, not lost, just real. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I couldn't walk away from this. Not now. The box sat in front of me, filled with stories I had never been told. The tree stood behind me, roots deep in secrets I could never unearth fully. But I could try, and I would start by reading every single letter she wrote. I stayed at the cabin that night. I didn't sleep much. The rain kept tapping against the windows, a soft rhythm that sounded too much like breath. I sat at the kitchen table with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, surrounded by pieces of a life I had never known was mine. I read the letters one by one, carefully unfolding each page like it might fall apart in my hands. Elena's words were delicate, but clear. She had written them for me. Every line was full of love, not just the kind you say out loud, but the kind you live with every decision. She had been planning to tell me everything. She had dreams for me, a life she wanted to share. She never got the chance. In the last letter, she wrote something that stayed with me. If you grow up never knowing me, I hope you still become someone kind. That will be the part of me that survives. I sat with that sentence for a long time. In the morning, I walked back to the tree. The sky had cleared. Sunlight stretched across the soaked earth, casting long shadows through the woods. The oak looked smaller now, still powerful, still scarred, but no longer untouchable. I stood in front of it, box in hand, and whispered her name. Elena. Not Mom. Not yet. Maybe not ever. but her name deserved to be spoken. I dug a small hole at the base of the tree. I placed a new letter inside, a letter I wrote that night. I told her what I had learned, what I felt. I told her I was angry and heartbroken and grateful all at once. I told her I would remember her now, not as a myth, not as a secret, as a person, as my mother. Then I buried the letter, not to hide it, but to lay it to rest. I drove home later that afternoon. The road felt different, like I was leaving one world and entering another, not because the mystery was solved, but because I had finally looked it in the eye. When I got back to my apartment, Jasper ran to the door and circled my legs, meowing like I'd been gone for a year. I scooped him up and pressed my face into his fur. That little patch of warmth reminded me I was still here. Still me. At school, I returned to my classroom like nothing had changed, but everything had. I stood in front of my students and asked them to draw a portrait of someone they didn't fully know. Not a celebrity, not someone they admired, someone real, someone they wanted to understand better. One girl drew her grandmother, who spoke only Spanish and never told stories. One boy drew a brother he hadn't seen in 3 years. Another drew a mirror and said, "I don't know myself that well either." I nodded. I understood that more than ever. A few weeks later, I got a call from the sheriff's office. I had sent the tape and the letters. I didn't want revenge. I wanted it recorded. I wanted someone to know what happened. They told me there was no body, no charges they could file after so many years. Grant was never arrested. But something in his voice the last time we spoke told me he had already sentenced himself to the kind of guilt that doesn't go away. I didn't tell him I forgave him. I'm still not sure I do. But I'm not carrying it for him. That's the difference. Now, the photo of Elena sits beside my bed. I look at it every night. Sometimes I talk to her, just like I used to talk to Dad. I tell her how my day went. I tell her what I remember. I tell her I wish I had more to tell. There are still questions I'll never have answers to, things I'll never know. But the silence that once echoed through my life is gone. The box didn't just contain secrets, it contained truth. It contained a voice that had waited for years to be heard. I heard it, and I won't let it disappear again. If you're watching this, if you've ever felt like something in your life didn't add up, listen to your instincts. Ask the questions, look under the tree. You never know what you'll find when you finally dig. Not everything buried is meant to stay hidden. That's my story. I didn't expect a phone call to change everything I thought I knew about my family, my past, or myself. But it did. And if it's taught me anything, it's that the truth has a way of reaching you, even when the person who holds it is gone. If this story moved you, if you felt something while listening, take a second and like the video. It really helps more people find these stories. Comment below. Have you ever discovered something that changed how you saw your family? Or maybe there's a question you've never had the courage to ask. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want more real, raw stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's more coming. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the things we bury the deepest are the ones we need to uncover the most.